Good morning.
Good morning.
How would you like to encounter that slide?
Yeah.
I married
Who?
This is one of those stories in the Bible that honestly, when I read it, I just kind of scratch my head. You know, because God is sometimes working through these eternal purposes, and there are moments that seem confusing, or they're hidden, or they're disappointing, they're deceptive. And sometimes we can't even see like how the picture works until we get to the end of the picture. And this is one of those stories in the text. Because I think really Jacob had gotten to a point in his life, I think he thought he had some stuff pretty well figured out. Like he had taken the birthright, he had taken the blessing. They had sent him up north to his relatives to see if he could get up there and find a wife. He goes up there and he meets Rachel. And when he meets Rachel, I mean, the text doesn't quite say this, but it gets pretty close by just kind of the intuition of the text. I think he was just struck. I think he saw that girl and he was like, man, that is a one for me. And so he makes kind of this, I think maybe in his head he thought, okay, this is the way this is going to work out. I met this great girl, so I'm going to marry her. Then we're going to have a family. Then I'm going to go back home, and everything's going to work out fine. Everything's going to be perfect. I've got it all figured out. But the thing that Jacob didn't realize is Jacob didn't have anything figured out. And whatever he had in his head about how life was going to go, I think it went like way different than that. So Laban comes to Jacob and he says, look, just because you're my relative, you shouldn't work for me for nothing. What do you want for your wages? Now, I know it seems a little odd in our culture, and this probably is not the way it would work for most of us, but Jacob said, well, how about I marry your youngest daughter? That sounds like pretty good wages. So he's supposed to work 7 years and marry Rachel. Now it says that Laban had 2 daughters. Now when it describes them, it says Leah has weak eyes. Now in English we read weak eyes and we might think, well, she can't see very well. That is a possibility. But I don't think it's the way that particular word is used in the text. Usually that is a word that it means delicate or tender or gentle. So maybe it could have been one of those words. Maybe she had tender eyes or gentle eyes. Maybe we might even think maybe she had beautiful eyes. That she just had these really striking eyes. Have you ever seen a picture of somebody and like their eyes were just so incredibly beautiful? Now, there's another possibility that Hebrew word can also mean to be sorrowful. Could be that she had sorrowful eyes. That life just kind of wasn't going the way that she wanted, or however you'd like to interpret that. Now, about Rachel, it's pretty clear. The text says that she is beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance. Now, there's not too many ways to mess that up. She was a really good-looking lady. Like, she was a good-looking woman. And so that is how they are described in the text. Well, Jacob says, I'm going to marry Rachel. That's what I'll work 7 years, and then I'll be able to marry Rachel. Well, when you think about that just a little bit, how many times do we build like Jacob? We've got these expectations, and sometimes we build them around really kind of fluid things. Like, have you ever built an expectation around a career, like a job? Like you're in a job and you think, okay, in this job I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to move up to this, and then I'm going to become this, and I'm going to go through this progression, and I'm going to go through this way through the ladder of the company, and all of a sudden maybe something happens, maybe the company gets sold, Maybe you find out that it's not nearly as good of a company as you thought it was supposed to be, and you're like, after a couple of years, you're like, man, I don't want to spend my whole life working here. And then all of a sudden, you've built this plan, but the plan has to change. Or have you done it like around health? Like you think you know exactly what's going to happen, exactly where you're going, and then something comes along with your health, and then all of a sudden your path is like completely changed, but you didn't really see it coming. I mean, I don't want to meddle too much. Maybe this is not meddling. But how about with relationships? Like, have you ever, like, in your life, did you have a relationship and you think, like, this relationship is going to evolve into this and then into this and then into this, and then, but somewhere down the line, that relationship didn't quite work out, something happened, and some of us who are older might like of previous relationships, and it just didn't work quite the way that we expected it to work. Or even sometimes our dreams. You ever have any dreams that change? Like at one point in life, you have one dream that you want to accomplish one thing in life, and then later in life, another dream comes along, and you're trying, all of a sudden, that dream doesn't mean as much to you as it did before. That's when life changes. And when that happens to us, it usually changes pretty quickly. So in this story, Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, and this is, I've used this at weddings before, and they seemed to him like only a few days because of his love for her. I mean, the text goes, and it showed so clearly how much Jacob loved Rachel. He served 7 years, and then just like a few days, he just loved her so much. And then it gets, the 7 years are over, and he goes to Laban. And you can imagine his excitement, right? He goes to Laban and he says, Laban, my 7 years are up. Bring me my wife. That's exactly what the text says. Bring me my wife. And so Laban, he waits until evening. He invites everybody. He throws a big feast. They have a huge party. And the text, it's just a wonderful piece of text. It says, and it came to pass the next morning, behold, it was Leah. It was Leah. Can you imagine? Now, first, I'm just going to be honest with you. There's a couple of things about this story that I have, in all of my years of study, I've still not figured out. Okay? Number one is, I don't know how you marry the wrong woman and you don't know it till the next day. Like, I mean, weren't their voices different? I mean, now it's a different culture, and so, you know, people who were engaged didn't have, like, always really close contact. I mean, they were pretty well watched, but I still haven't quite figured that one out. I mean, one is lovely of form and appearance, and one has weak eyes, but evidently in the dark, Jacob didn't know the difference. Now, here's the thing I want you to think about. And sometimes we read through these stories and we miss some of the most beautiful irony you've ever seen. When Jacob took advantage of his father, what did it say about his father's eyes? Do you remember? They were dim. They were dim. He couldn't see well. Because he couldn't see well, he was trying to figure out which son it was. When Laban decides to throw the party for the marriage, when does he throw it? At night, in dark, when it's dim. He deceived his dad because his eyes were dimmed, and he was deceived in dim light. How did he deceive his father? He put the skins on his hands so he'd rub him and think, oh, that's Esau. It doesn't say this in a text, but we do know this from culture. What would the bride have been wearing? A veil. He was deceived. He deceived his father in darkness and by clothing, and he was deceived in the darkness with clothing. You're going to see how that works out. Now, here's the thing. You get into the story, and then all of these things start happening. And most people see Leah as the unwanted piece of the puzzle. The unwanted piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure Jacob ever really wanted to marry her. He got tricked into it. He wanted to marry Rachel. There's a way that the words are used in the text that it's okay that we translate it to love less, or when God saw that Leah was loved less, but the word actually is the word for hate. When Leah says, I have a child now because the Lord has seen I am hated. She's the unwanted piece. And everybody looks right over Leah. Everybody, it seems, is all concerned about Rachel. And Rachel's desired, and Leah is overshadowed. The text is even really specific. It says, Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. She is like the unwanted piece of the puzzle. So then you remember what happens in the story, right? But how many times in life do people go through that? Like they're overlooked. People just don't recognize them for who they are. Maybe they're living in the shadow of someone else. Maybe they're unwanted. I wonder how many times Leah thought, man, he just never even wanted to marry me. And I wonder how many times people have just thought that they're unwanted in the world by somebody or because of some kind of relationship. Think she ever wondered about being compared to her younger sister? Like Leah's the oldest and Rachel's the youngest, right? You think she's ever like, man, I can't do anything as well as my sister can do it. Or how many times do we go through life and we're just continually comparing ourselves to someone else, trying to and honestly just in our evaluation of our own selves thinking that we're not as good as somebody else. And like most people, Leah goes kind of through this process where she's overshadowed. Except God sees something completely different. And I think for us, many times, the way that we view ourselves or even the way that other people view us doesn't have the beauty in the way that God views us. So the text says, when God saw that, whether you translated that she was loved less, maybe you want to be really, really specific with the text, and you translate it when God saw Leah was hated. Then the story starts to get interesting, doesn't it? He opens up her womb. She starts having kids. She has one child. She has, y'all got to help me. I didn't memorize all of these, but I think this is the right order. She has Reuben, right? He's the firstborn. Are we with me? Is that right? Somebody check out me the text. Somebody in the text say, Greg, you got it all messed up when I get mixed up. First it was Reuben. My daughter-in-law says thumbs up. That was right. And so because God sees that she's hated, and Reuben is built off the word to see. And then after Reuben, there's Simeon. And Simeon is built off the word to hear, because God has heard my cry. He's heard my misery. And then the next one, the third one, is Levi. And Levi is built off of the word that means to join together. And she says, now, after 3 children, my husband and I will be joined together. You see how she is trying to get Jacob to love her because she's giving child after child after child. Then she gets to the fourth one, which is Judah. And Judah is built off the word for praise. And because she is praising God, because now finally my husband will love me. Just stop at Judah. Because God does something through Leah that Jacob, he can't even imagine yet, and he can't even get it in his head. Because Leah gives birth to Judah. Judah is the lineage of David, and Jesus is the lineage of David. So Leah, Judah, David, Jesus. When God works the promise, does he work the promise through Rachel or does he work it through Leah? He works the promise through Leah. And that is just this magnificent part of the text where God, he works through these hidden and missing pieces of the puzzle. You even jump to the New Testament, you get it. Because you get to the cross. What does a cross look like? If you were one of the 12 disciples, in the moment, like you've been to the Last Supper, you've been to the garden, you've seen the arrest, you're scattered now because you're afraid they're going to come get you next. Then the next thing you know, Jesus is on trial, then he's hanging on the cross. What do you think that looks like if you're not reading it now, looking back on it? If you were right in the moment, you would probably think, boy, this is the end. This is the end. Nothing has worked out the way as one of the 12 disciples you thought it was going to work out. Even after the resurrection, 3 days later, you're still not hadn't quite figured out that it's working out the way that it's supposed to work out, but it's working out the exact way that God wants it to work out. So when we're talking about missing pieces, especially this story, this is what I kind of want you to hear. I think that probably some people, including people in here, including even myself, I think we're probably living in some confusing nights. A confusing night like Jacob had when he had this night that he married this woman that wasn't the woman that he expected to marry, and he woke up the next day and thought, I did what? Maybe it's broken relationships. Maybe it's the loss of somebody that you love. Maybe it's a disappointment. Maybe a disappointment with a person. Maybe a disappointment with a job. Maybe a disappointment with a thing. Maybe somewhere in your mind you're even wrestling with disappointment with God. I mean, you've been asking for something or praying for something or wondering about something, and it is just not happening the way that it should happen, or it's not happening the way that you think God ought to make it happen. Maybe it's an expectation. You thought something was going to happen, and it just fell completely apart, and it didn't work. It's that moment when we think, this is not the story I thought I was living. It's what I call kind of a Leah moment. I married who? What happened? Why did it not work out the way that I wanted it to work out? And I don't know how to answer that question for all of you. Because sometimes the thing with God and missing pieces is we don't know how all of the pieces of the puzzle fit until God puts the puzzle together. But I am convinced that God always works through those missing pieces to put the puzzle together, even when we can't figure it out ourselves. So maybe this morning, maybe your prayer should be just really, really simple. Maybe the prayer this morning just, God, how are you working in my life? How are you working? Maybe you can't discern that. Maybe you can't figure it out. Maybe it's just not making any sense to you. Maybe what you need is just to come up here and maybe you need to pray with a group of people. Maybe you need to just come down and pray by yourself. Maybe you need some help trying to figure that out. Maybe what you need to do is give your life to God so God can work in your life. Maybe you need to submit to Him, whether it's by baptism, repentance, confession, just giving your life to God and asking God to shape your life and put the missing pieces of your life together in a puzzle that makes sense. I think what happens to us sometimes is we get really discouraged because we can't see the end, and most of the time we really, really want to. So I just ask you, can you trust God enough to let God put the puzzle together? If you need to respond, we're going to ask you to do that while we stand and sing.